My film, A Banquet, is a slow-burning psychological horror about a family dealing with grief. The mother of the family is Holly. She has two teenage daughters, one of whom is at that very delicate age where she's about to transition from high school to university. But Betsy doesn't really have anything that she's special at or good at or even driven by. So she's a character who is kind of questioning her purpose and also her future, because she's of that generation who are, hyper aware of the climate crisis, and, I think are struggling to find confidence in a future, let alone thinking about how they might invest in one as an individual. So Betsy's journey begins when she's kind of called by something away from a party that she's at with her friends that leads her into the woods. And following a kind of like spiritual revelation there, a sense of purpose seems to manifest itself. And it's, from her perspective, asking her to stop eating.
Where we shot A Banquet was predominantly South London. We found our hero house in Streatham, and it was in this sort of beautiful cul-de-sac, very filmic. And the house that we ended up going for sort of, Ruth has made comps to Parasite quite a few times, and a lot of people have sort of noticed that similarity. It's a wonderful piece of like architectural space in terms of where a lot of the action takes place. That house was really amazing, and we had an incredible production designer, Sophia Stokes, who sort of repainted the entire thing and created this very minimalist, dark, cavernous space, which when you first meet the family and the house, it feels, incredibly stylish and well kept up, and you then sort of track the layers of disintegration that happen to this once very happy, modern, stylish home. It becomes, a lot of frayed edges, and it becomes more of a fortress.
The house we got is not typically, it wasn't typically English. It's got this kind of mid-century vibe. And I think the reason that I was drawn to it was because it did have this stage-like feel. It felt theatrical. It had this window as well, this huge horizontal sort of almost panoramic window onto a very tropical looking garden, which felt really bizarre for London too. So the location itself offered a lot of really interesting visual stuff, but also considering we were going to be shooting there for the bulk of our time, it needed to be a space that we weren't going to get tired of looking at.
We sort of got everyone on board with the notion of shooting while COVID cases were super low. And where we initially started was actually, I have to say, outreach to all the productions across the globe and what they were doing. It was looking at New Zealand, it was looking at Iceland, it was looking at Korea. And, I was lucky enough to know filmmakers that were there that had done it. And obviously the situation was very different then. But we were able to talk to them and talk about their protocols, and all of the producers in the UK were sort of sharing protocol documents that were flying around from the various studios. So we actually initially started with our own guidelines that we built ourselves sort of quite rigorously by just through communication with other filmmakers. And then when the BFC guidelines came in, it was good to have them, because it felt like our blueprint was right. And we sort of only had to make a few tweaks, but it was just like, okay, great. We're not total cowboys. We are doing it per what everyone else thinks we should be doing.
I think that we are seeing a trend in a certain kind of horror, not just in Britain. But having said that, some of my favorite recent British films are horror films, like Censor, Saint Maud and His House, But I think these films are all fitting into a category that I've heard termed transcendental horror, which is much less about, the monster or much, or the beast at the core of the fear, and more about really what it is to be human and how we deal with the complexities of that. So I think it's kind of about characters who have to have an awakening to face up to their inner demons rather than, exterior demons. And that's the kind of horror that interests me. So I think, A Banquet from that perspective is really, it's, in the same way as Babadook is, it's a film about grief. It's a film about how people process grief and about how a teenage girl deals with her depression. It actually feels like a real privilege to be premiering the film in Toronto, not least because it's part of a, reduced program, and we're in this discovery section. It's what we hoped for. And I feel extremely lucky and very, very excited because we're going to be able to attend as well. And that's a huge thing after the past year and a half where people premiering their debuts have done so online. And for me as well, I'm really glad to be at TIFF. I was a member of the talent lab there in 2010, and it was one of the richest experiences I've had doing labs. It was a very, very it was a very brilliant and memorable experience. So I'm really looking forward to going back.